In my view, it would be demoralizing for PSG because they were so brilliant. They were so good, and you just can't expect that level of dominance away at Anfield.
Here's the Champions League bracket as it stands after the first legs of the round of 16 ties. As you can see, PSG, Atletico Madrid and Bayer Leverkusen all with work to do down from those first legs. We're going to talk about all three of them. We'll start with Atletico. Interesting, when you look at the fixtures in all competitions, they've got a tough run coming up. Well, obviously, this game against Real Madrid, but a tough run in La Liga as well. Do you think that they need to sort of decide which competition they want to try and win? Because they're in the title race, aren't they, in Spanish football?
Yeah, I think you look at the La Liga game, but they're right in it. They're a point off of Barcelona. You can understand why you want to give everything to every competition. I will say, the one thing, and having researched this Atleti team, having commentated the first leg, I do think they use their bench really well. And so I don't think any of those guys, particularly in the forward positions or even in that midfield, Simeone subbed off all four of the midfield players in the game against Real Madrid. They get 27 goals from the bench this season. And I believe it's something like 20 assists as well. So they're rotating. They're bringing guys through. This is a team with real depth of squad. So I think they're going to make a few changes from that team. You might see Conor Gallagher in the starting 11. You might see Alexander Sorloth in the starting 11 against Getafe, who are a very difficult team to beat, usually in La Liga. But you kind of got to give it for everything. Ultimately, we know that this game against Getafe is probably getting that second billing behind the game against Real Madrid. They have a little bit more time to rest, playing the Tuesday towards the Wednesday. Look, we know that this team is not going to want for wanting in that game against Real Madrid in the second leg. So I think ultimately, the Champions League right now, considering the beast that Real Madrid have been for them in the Champions League, they played them 4 times in the knockout stages, including 2 finals, lost all of them. They have to finally beat this Real Madrid side, which was so difficult to do, having no Champions League pedigree. They've never won the competition. And here is the history of the Madrid Derby in the Champions League. I've only won 1 game, which was the second leg. They had lost the first leg 3-0. They lost the final after extra time. The first time, they lost it on penalties. The second time, they lost in the quarterfinal in 2015. It just has to finally be the moment for Atletico to do this. They have a team that can do it. They're only trailing by a goal going into a home second leg, which normally they don't have. They're normally going away to Real Madrid in the second leg. So this has to be the time. This has to be the time for them to go and do it.
If this is the time and they are to do it, what have they got to get right in this second leg?
Well, I think it was interesting that obviously the scoreline in the first leg kind of reflected something that Diego Simeone was okay with. They just have to win the game. And I think the biggest thing for them is, I think, to do a little bit more with the possession of the ball that they do have. They actually kept a decent amount of it against Real Madrid in the first leg, but it was largely toothless. It was largely based off of Diego Simeone's usual tactic of, let's keep everything in front of us. We got 3 players behind the ball, 4 players behind the ball, and it's up to those guys up front to create a moment of magic. Julian Alvarez did create a moment of magic in the first leg. I think a lot of it will depend on how much more Antoine Griezmann can do in this second leg, because it was kind of a no-show in that first leg. But I think doing more when they have the ball, and really, honestly, doing what Real Madrid did to them in the first leg, which is first 15 minutes, first 3 minutes of the game, they slip a ball behind into Rodrigo, they get a goal. Second slip ball into Rodrigo could easily have been a penalty. They have to put that pressure on early. Atleti can do that at home. They come flying out of the traps and make life difficult for the opponent. I really want to see them do that in the second leg.
You mentioned Griezmann there, and he has fallen off a little bit recently compared to the level that he set prior to this period. At the start of the season, he was playing brilliantly. Julian Alvarez, though, and obviously he got that crucial goal and has kept them in the tie with that goal in the first leg, but he does need some help. He can't do it all on his own, can he?
Yeah, and you look at these early goals for Julian Alvarez, who is experiencing a wonderful moment. I believe it's now 6 goals and 6 for him up front in that forward line. He's got 22 goals in all competitions, and he gets that amazing goal. But it's meant to be a strike partnership, and Antoine Griezmann plays that sort of second striker role in a little bit of a different way. He's coming back, he's trying to create, but he was floating around looking for somewhere in that midfield to create something, and there just wasn't anything there for him. He was struggling to create opportunities and create chances for himself and for teammates in that game. He was struggling, and he has not had the best moment recently. So Griezmann has got to deliver a really good performance in the second leg, because I don't think they can win this competition or this tie unless he delivers a really strong performance in this next leg. Alvarez has hit his stride. He's looking comfortable in that Atleti shirt, which is not difficult or not easy for a forward player. He's starting to find his way. The question is, does he have someone alongside him that's helping or hurting?
Much more of a mountain to climb for Bayer Leverkusen against Bayern Munich, down 3-0 from the first leg. Do you think Leverkusen and Xabi Alonso were kind of caught by surprise because they've dominated this fixture in all competitions coming up to this point? They were unbeaten in 6 going into that first leg. Do you think that they ever thought that they would go away from the Allianz Arena having lost 3-0?
Well, I think that we know that the shape of the game is often determined by who's the home team. I think Bayern have had performances where they have been much better at home. They've created opportunities and they've had the bulk of possession. The flip side at the Bayern Arena, where Leverkusen have been the strong side when they've been at home. So you know, and I think Xabi Alonso knew by not picking a striker that his team were going to be in it to sustain some pressure for a while. What I don't think he could have accounted for, and what I think shows kind of a lack of sharpness from this team, is the number of terrible mistakes that Xabi Alonso's side made in the second leg. The goalkeeper dropping an absolute clanger. You must say Xabi Alonso deserves some blame. I wonder if he'll go with Radetzky in the second leg, given how poor the reserve was in the first leg. Dropped an awful clanger in that game. You look at the mistake of getting a man sent off as well when Manuel Neuer's just gotten injured. You look at some of these defeats for Xabi Alonso's side away from home. Struggled in the first leg against Bayern. They lost away at Atleti in the league phase as well. You look at that massive defeat they took at the hands of Liverpool as well in the league phase where they were nowhere near it. They recovered. They won almost all the other games in the Champions League and obviously in the neutral site game against Atalanta in the final. Those are kind of the big games where they've had the chance to not just have a statement of intent that they're here to stay, but they're one of the big boys of Europe, and we've treated them as such given the fact that they went unbeaten in the Bundesliga last season, got to the Europa League final, finished as a top 8 side in the league phase. A lot of people picked them to win this two-legged series, and I personally, as someone who's kind of really enjoyed this Leverkusen story, has wanted them to do well. I was really disappointed by the mistakes and the lack of mental sharpness in that first leg. I think you might ask me the question, is it over? There's a part of me that wonders if the game will completely change shape now that it's at the Bayern Arena. And I think that you look at Leverkusen and what they can do at home. I think they can do it.
I'll just sit here and you can ask yourself the questions. Let's talk about Xabi Alonso, because we had a really interesting chat a few weeks ago with Guillem Balaguer, and he was saying, obviously, that Xavi's kind of waiting in the wings to take that Real Madrid job. It may be over the summer or in future seasons when Carlo Ancelotti moves on. But do you think the Real Madrid hierarchy will have looked at some of these big games where he's shown a little bit, and I will say a little bit, of tactical naivety and making some changes, and you mentioned not starting the first choice goalkeeper in this game, where you think a big-time manager at the biggest clubs in world football doesn't make that kind of decision? Yeah,
I mean, if you're Real Madrid, you compare him to your current manager, Carlo Ancelotti, and look at what he did in the Champions League final. Andre Lulin gets you most of the way there. Thibaut Courtois has kind of come back to fitness. You have a question, you're a killer in that moment. You pick Thibaut Courtois because he is the better player. And I think Xabi Alonso is still figuring things out. He's still relatively new at this. He's obviously been brilliant. He's obviously implemented a style of play. But the question is, can he deliver in these big moments? And there certainly are moments in last year's Bundesliga where they did enough to get over the line as an unbeaten champion. That's incredibly impressive. The games were pressure-packed along the way. You look at their run in the Europa League. They had some difficult second legs as well. But I still think that there are moments where he's showing that inexperience. I think the decisions that he made to not pick a striker in the game against Bayern Munich, to not pick your first-choice goalkeeper, they show of a manager that's still trying to please everyone in the squad and not quite be the killer. At Real Madrid, you have one job. Win the game that's in front of you. Win the trophy. You're not worrying about a squad game. You're worrying about your 11 best players, and you pick the best players in those games. So I think there would be a little bit of a worry, but that said, I still think he's the number one managerial prospect in the world. I think that he is that guy. When you look at what he's done with the club, that we're Champions League contenders, but weren't Champions League contenders in the way that they are right now.
You will take a little bit of solace, won't you, in this performance. It's not an impossible task, given the fact that the game is going to take place at the Bay Arena. These are the last 3 games against Bayern there. It was a 0-0 draw, the most recent one, but then 3-0 and 2-1, the other victories against Bayern Munich at the Bay Arena there. So it is still possible for Leverkusen, but they're going to have to start that game absolutely brilliantly. Let's move it on to PSG against Liverpool. This was, I suppose, the most one-sided performance from a team that didn't manage to come away with a victory. How on earth they managed to lose this game 1-0 against Liverpool, God only knows, really. I mean, they completely dominated it right up until the end. It'll be interesting, though, from the PSG perspective, do they use that as inspiration for the game at Anfield and bring out the same kind of performance and just manage to score a goal or two? Or does it show a level of frustration that we weren't able to get it done? We should have got it done at the Parc des Princes, and that carries over. That frustration carries over to the game at Anfield.
In my view, it would be demoralizing for PSG because they were so brilliant. They were so good, and you just can't expect that level of dominance away at Anfield. That said, it's not over. I think they can win a game at Anfield based off what we saw in the first leg, but not like that. Not like 71% possession, 27 shots to 2, and what we saw in that game. We're not seeing that again. They're just too good at Anfield. You know that Liverpool are going to score at least one goal at home. It would be shocking if you kept the clean sheet away from home, but you got to go and score multiple goals. And I think there would be a real frustration that they don't have a 2-3 goal advantage going into the second leg, because they easily could have done were it not for Alisson. You look at some of the frustration down the years for PSG in this Champions League, runners up in the 2020 COVID bubble, and the issues that they've had, going out in the round of 16. Anytime they get into the business end, we saw them in the semifinal last year where they had a similar situation against Borussia Dortmund. They hit the woodwork 5 times over 2 legs. They should have won this thing by now. They have the talent. They're good enough. And I think they would be really frustrated to not have gotten more from that first leg.
The one thing I would say about this PSG team under Luis Enrique this season compared to the previous seasons, we saw all of the stars there, the Mbappes and Neymars. Their fortunes don't rest solely on how those guys get on in these big games. We know that PSG's season is defined by how they get on in the latter stages of the Champions League. It almost doesn't matter in Liga. So the key for them is to be able to perform as a team now. It's not just, will Neymar score? Will he have a good game? Or will Mbappe score? Will he have a good game? And I think that's the subtle change that does give PSG an opportunity. It's more of a team game for them now.
Yeah, they have real balance and depth in midfield, where I think they have probably the best midfield in European football at the moment. You look at Vitinha, Jean Neves, Fabian Ruiz. That is a brilliant combination of 3. Look at that forward line as well. They've got a lot of talent. But, again, away at Anfield, they've been pretty poor away from home in this Champions League. It would be difficult to see them dominating like that.
Clear your diaries for next week, Tuesday and Wednesday, March 11th and 12th, the second legs of the round of 16. 4 games on Tuesday: Barca against Benfica, Liverpool versus PSG, Inter versus Feyenoord, and then Leverkusen against Bayern. And then the 4 games on Wednesday: Lille, Dortmund, Aston Villa, Club Brugge, Atletico Madrid, and Arsenal against PSV. It is going to be very, very entertaining in all of them as we see who will get through to the last 8 of the Champions League.